Hello there. Welcome to my campfire. My name is Seraphine, the Midnight Bard, and I travel from place to place collecting stories. But please, come closer. Do not be shy. We're all friends here after all. And if nothing else, you can trust a friend, right? Well, perhaps not always. In fact, I once came across a cautionary tale that might make you think twice about trusting friends too freely. Lend me your ears and I'll tell you why sometimes it's okay to be left out. I am what some people would call a bit of a loner. Those people are idiots. In reality, I'm just like any other person you've met. I require conversation. I desire interaction. I wish for a lover to hear my pleas on those dark, cold nights when the voices of doubt in my head become too dark and need to be let into the light. That, however, is not my life. Those idiots from before would probably say that I have trust issues. On that, they would be correct. Middle school is a magical time in a young man's life, where the hormones of puberty just start to influence his behavior and physicality in ways that make life about as awkward and difficult to navigate as a penguin trying to pilot a 747. This is when I met my best friend, Tim. My inability to speak to anyone of the opposite gender without crumbling into an anxiety-induced mess gelled well with Tim's inability to comprehend basic mathematics. Some people would call it a friendship of convenience for both of us, considering the fact that he only passed algebra because of the tutoring I gave him, and the only kiss I ever got was because of his prodding and meddling. Those people are the same idiots as before. Those people never saw Tim and I as we sat on the top of my roof, smoking cigarettes and commiserating on the shared disappointment of our fathers. They never heard Tim cry into the phone when Rebecca, the love of his life, Longmore, broke up with him over a text message sophomore year. They didn't gasp when I lifted up my shirt to show him the fist-sized bruise on the side of my chest when Daniel Jacobs decided I needed a bit of coloring on my pale complexion. They weren't there when Tim got back from his 3-day suspension, grinning for kicking the ever-loving shit out of Daniel. Knowing this now, these hypothetical idiots can understand how much Tim and I meant to each other, which is why I noticed right away when Tim started making other friends. I wasn't much of a social butterfly and generally stuck to Tim as much as I could, and relied on a small number of acquaintances when I couldn't. I'm not an asshole. I would never expect myself to be Tim's only friend in the world. He was on the varsity team for both soccer and football by junior year and made friends and acquaintances as easily as most people breathe. At the end of whatever game I got dragged along to, or at the end of whatever beer we were drinking at whatever house party we were at, I knew that Tim was still my friend. Something started changing senior year, though. I noticed it when I caught him talking about some house party with a couple of his football buddies. This was unusual to hear because it was a party I hadn't been invited and dragged to. When I asked him about it after the meatheads had left, he said, in a thoughtful way, "It's more of a get-together with the football guys. I would have invited you, but—" I could see the genuine look of sorrow on his face. Tim was a great guy, but couldn't hide his true feelings for shit. I sighed. "No worries. We still up for some Smash Bros later?" He smiled. "You know it, brother." This may not seem like much to you, but it was the first indicator of a change in his behavior. In the wake of a disaster, especially as big as what happened, you look back on even the most insignificant of moments and guess your own actions time and time again. What could I have done to change what happened? How could I have been so stupid to not see it? Why didn't I do anything when I knew something was wrong? So many questions to torture yourself with over the years with answers, if you ever find any, that don't change a single thing except to make yourself feel like crap. The only answer that seems to make any sense to the changes that Tim went through came in the form of Simon Jeffries. Simon transferred to our high school near the end of our junior year. He got lucky in that respect, as he was excused from most of the time-consuming year-long projects that all of the classes had been building up to. This time left him free to pursue the oh-so-necessary thing that every person who moves from everything they know into a completely unknown environment. Connections. Considering how big he was, it wasn't much of a surprise when he tried out for the football team. It was a surprise just how good he turned out to be, though. He went from being completely unknown to the athletic staff to being a first-string quarterback, annoying the hell out of one Mr. Daniel Jacobs. Despite everything that happened, I still get a smile whenever I remember the look on Daniel's face as he received the news. Our high school had the unfortunate distinction of being in the same district as the first and third best teams in the state, so even in a good season, we didn't get anywhere past those points. Unless, of course, you have the monster that is Simon. Tim always talked about how awesome he was in practice and how impossible it was to actually catch any kind of hold on him. I didn't think much of it until I actually went to the first game of our senior year season. We were matched with last year's state champion and, despite the prospective greatness of Simon, no one expected us to actually win the game. And for the first half, it appeared like that self-fulfilling prophecy would happen as the score rested at 10-15. A valiant effort to be sure, and all at the hands of Simon Jeffries and our kicker. The second half started with a lackluster run and a field goal for us, 13-15, and with the full expectation that we wouldn't stay close for very long. The state champs had the ball, their own star quarterback about to pass when one of our own managed to slip past the line and sack the hell out of him. It was such a surprise that our stands initially cheered as he got off the quarterback and started to run back to the defensive line. The stands, noticing what the player hadn't, fell into complete silence as the quarterback laid still on the ground. It didn't take long for the medic to run onto the field, injuries being somewhat common even in high school football games, and began performing CPR after a quick check of his pulse. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The stretcher came next, with people lifting him and players on each side staring in shock at the limp body of one who had so much promise. Except for Simon. Simon was smiling. Smiling because he knew without someone who could actually throw the ball half as well as the soon-to-be deceased star quarterback, their defensive line would crumble among his onslaught of laser-precision throws and inability to be tackled. Even when the game ended with a smashing display of ruthlessness, 27-15, no one cheered for us. The news hadn't quite reached the field of the quarterback's DOA at the hospital, but no one was surprised when a school picture of him, smiling with the hope of a future he would never see, appeared on the local news the next day. I tried to call Tim the next day, Saturday, with no luck. I decided to give him a bit more space, as he probably needed it after seeing one of his teammates kill someone else, even if the coroner did find a previously unknown heart defect exacerbated by the strenuous activity of playing top-tier high school football. Sunday passed without a call back. Monday came around. While we had technically won the game, the school was somber and lacked the cheer expected of someone who had beat the state champions just a couple of days prior. Except for the football team themselves. You could pick them up pretty easily in the sea of miserable faces, as they were the only ones smiling from ear to ear and high-fiving each other as they passed in the halls. And much to my chagrin, Tim was one of the morbid revelers, smacking the back of Simon as we both entered our shared English class with Miss Farmer. I watched him as she tried to capture our undivided attention with the words of Steinbeck. For once, neither of us paid attention, as the halo of victory floated over his head, and I watched him and wondered where my friend had gone. I tried to gain his attention and just ask him how the hell he could feel good about winning that game, but was butted out of the social queue when a number of other football players rushed from around corners and lockers and shouted out any attempts of catching his ear. The carousing was so loud and exuberant that it took the full force of 2 school resource officers to get them to leave the hallways and at least do their celebrating in the lunchroom. Tim didn't meet me at the bus stop like usual. While I attempted to keep the ritual that I thought would be one of the few connections we still had, I saw Simon's convertible Sebring drive by at twice the posted speed limit of 20 miles per hour. The 4 seats occupied by Simon himself, Richard Bailey, the halfback, Dennis Freeman, the cornerback who had tackled the now-dead quarterback last week, and Tim in the front seat. He didn't even have the courtesy to look as he passed by. I didn't try to call him again for the rest of the week. I thought I caught him looking back in English class a couple of times over the next couple of days, but what I saw was the face of someone who couldn't understand why I wasn't happy for him. Whether he got the hint that I was angry at him for celebrating the death of someone, or whether he didn't care, he never called me again. That's a lie. He called me that Thursday. I wasn't expecting it, as he had all but ignored me in favor of football practice and nightly sessions of whatever the hell they did at Simon's house nearly every night. It was even more surprising as I had overheard the conversation between him and Simon about going to his place for something or another tonight. "Hey, man." I didn't answer. The act of being snubbed by the only person who seemed to care about my existence in the school had only made the self-imposed isolation I was experiencing that much more, well, isolating. I heard a sigh on the other end of the phone, and it almost made my anger crack in half. It was a sigh I knew so well. It was the sigh of my friend. "Look, dude," he continued. "I'm sorry about this week. I know I haven't seen much of you, or talked for that matter. I'm just excited, you know? We beat the state champs in our first game of the season." I thought for a second. Maybe it was just excitement. It was such a rare occasion when Tim accomplished anything of this magnitude. It reminded me of the first time he aced a math test in 8th grade, but that excitement concealed a horrible truth. What about the quarterback? There wasn't an immediate answer on the phone. I continued, "Someone died, and you're celebrating." I gave him time to answer. I wanted to hear any amount of remorse in his voice, any condemnation of the excitement Tim and Simon and all the others felt of their victory on the field. I didn't get that, though. Instead, I got an invitation. "Simon's having a small get-together tonight. Maybe you can come over and—" "Fuck off, Tim." I hung up. He called again. I ignored it. I went to school the next morning expecting the same sort of shrug-off standoffedness and youthful exuberance Tim had been showing with the rest of the meatheads. Instead of that, though, was nothing. Tim didn't show up for Miss Farmer's class. When I didn't see him in his assigned seat, I looked in the usual spot the big galoots frequented during lunch. I didn't find any of them. No one I asked had seen or heard from him since last night. I knew something was wrong when my mother actually picked me up from school. She worked 12-hour days at the hospital and was never able to pick me up. Tim was in jail. She didn't go into detail about the incident, but the internet filled in the rest of the lurid details. After Tim wasn't able to convince me to join Simon, him, Richard, and Dennis, Richard called his girlfriend with the promise of Thursday night boozing and a place to skip the half-day on Friday. According to leaked police reports, Rebecca Longmore showed up at the house of Simon Jeffries at 10:13 p.m. While she was expecting a larger get-together, it wasn't enough of a deterrent to dissuade her from taking the offered drink, unknowingly laced with a tranquilizer powerful enough to knock out someone twice her size. The police were called at 11:31 p.m. when Rebecca's parents didn't receive the promised check-in call from her. At 11:42 p.m., a large man with a description matching Simon Jeffries' build was seen jumping into the neighbor's backyard, before quickly jumping the stone wall and into the night, never to be seen again. At 11:56 p.m., Officers Jones and Marcus arrived at the Jeffries residence. When the front door wasn't answered, and Officer Jones misidentified the smoke from a clump of burning sage as a house fire, the officers called the fire department, who arrived on the scene at approximately 12:07 a.m. and busted open the front door and into the scene that many of them can only describe in their nightmares. Tim, Richard, and Dennis were laid out at 3 points of a pentagram, hallucinating on what was only described as enough acid to get the entire band pish tripping balls. A small table at the head of the pentagram had a ceramic bowl, later identified as a missing antique from the Museum of Colonial History's exhibit on the Salem witch trials, that held a bundle of sage that smoked heavily and obscured vision in the room. That small obstruction was gratefully received by the waiting police and firemen as they stared at the center of the pentagram where the body of Rebecca Longmore lay. Her feet were cut off at the ankle and her hands at the wrist. The 3 remaining football players laid in a daze at 3 of the bottom points of the pentagram. The bottom right left absent by the presumably fleeing Simon Jeffries, holding 2 of her arms, and Tim holding her right foot. Her left foot was recovered in the Jeffries' backyard 20 minutes later. While the weapon was never found, a vertical slit from Rebecca's sternum to her crotch was determined to be the wound that killed her. The further mutilations to her hands and feet done to her post-mortem. The pentagram itself was painted on the ground with the blood of several items, of which only a dog, cat, ferret, and pigeon could be identified. The home was mostly empty otherwise, the only rooms furnished being the living room and one of the 2 upstairs bedrooms. Later examination of the deeds to the house showed the signatures of one Mr. Ichabod and Mrs. Justice Jeffries, who had no record of being born, much less existing, before and after the signing of the deed for the house. I don't know what would have happened to me if I had forgiven Tim and taken his invitation. I don't know what would have happened to me if I had been more sociable with Simon. I don't know what would have happened if I had tried out for the football team like Tim had wanted me to sophomore year. I do know one thing though. Sometimes it's okay to be left out.